What if all this was designed just to see how we react?
In the second season, Jim Matthews gave us a theory that had all the From fans scratching their heads. And the theory, of course, was whether or not FromVille is an experiment. In the first season, the threats we were introduced to definitely gave off that vibe. So Jim's comment in the second season made a lot of sense. Now we're almost at the end of the third season, and I believe we have better grounds to argue for and against the notion, right? So put on your debate hats and let's get down to business. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Is FromVille an experiment? In the first season, the two main clues that I clocked in on that this town is not what it seems to be were A. Modern technology does not seem to be working properly in the town, and B. Despite the said interference, the electrical appliances in the town simply work fine. This is why, when Jim and Jade decided that they would make a radio and hopefully get some help, it made complete sense. And let's not forget Tabitha's brilliant idea of seeing where the main electrical power line actually connects. The source of electricity would explain a lot about the town. But then, as the season finale aired, we saw that this town does not, in fact, have a main electrical power source. The electrical line was hanging in the air, not connected to anything at all. Then the question is, where do people get electricity? Also, the fact that the radio works only to connect to some entity or being that is a part of this very town that they want to escape also clues us in on the place. The town is a place where even radio signals can't escape from. While the show has mostly leaned toward horror and supernatural aspects up until now, we can't forget that the genre of the show is literally science fiction. So maybe all the things we're looking at in a supernatural aspect can be looked at in a science fiction way. I mean, the 8th episode of From literally made it a point to ensure we knew what truly happened the day Boyd was trapped in the dry well. Up until now, we were all theorizing that maybe there was a supernatural entity, the boogeyman at play, who threw the rope down to Boyd, because Martin, who was shackled to the wall, could not have thrown it to him. But now we know it was Julie, who traveled back in time to the dungeon and threw the rope to Boyd. Not only that, the creepy sounds that Tabitha and Victor heard in the tunnel system under the town could have also been Julie's footsteps. Yet again, time traveling. So we have a character who can time travel. Sure, this time travel thing is not a supernatural phenomenon. There has to be a scientific reason. Well, as you'll find out on a rewatch, the crumbs of a scientific experiment are littered all over the show. Several keen-eyed Redditors have noticed these nods throughout the series. It simply does not make sense that so many people all over the USA suddenly come across a tree on their path, turn around and start driving along this road with trees adorning both sides, without realizing that the road has changed. Unless you consider the possibility that there was a reality-distorting thing in effect. We saw Tabitha climbing up the stairs from the basement, which quickly shifted into the tower stairs. But Tabitha seemingly didn't realize anything like that was happening. It's almost like she was in a daze. I think whenever someone encounters the fallen tree, gazes up at the crows and turns around, they end up in a daze and do not realize the road they're currently on is not the same road they just drove on a few minutes before. Now, let's look at these monsters. They look like humans stuck in the 1980s, but they're forever stuck that way. Their organs are dried out, almost like they've been aged under the sun. They kill the humans, but they do not eat. Even though they act like predators, they do not run. They do not eat their catch. So it seems like they're not hunting for food. They're hunting for sport. It's almost like these monsters are a curated threat, designed to test just how far the experimenters in charge of this town can push the characters here. When Dale fused into the wall, I think most of us thought it was a warning for everyone that they cannot keep stepping into the faraway trees willy-nilly. But the whole event could very well be a nod to the experiment known as the Philadelphia experiment. In this experiment, a ship supposedly traveled 40 years into the future, and when it returned, all the crew members were fused to the wall. Could it be that when Dale stepped into the faraway tree, the experimenters decided to play a cruel joke on him and sent him to 2600, the date we saw mentioned in the scraps of paper on the bottle tree? If so, then it would explain why he came back in real time but was fused into the wall. If you look at his body in the pool, it looks like he was simply walking around then got stuck. That kind of makes sense, right? But wait, there's more. The FromVille could simply be an extension of the Montauk Project, a project where several wormholes were created to travel through time. To test the viability of these worlds hence created, people and children were abducted and sent through them. We saw it in Stranger Things, and I wouldn't be surprised if this whole project comes back to haunt us in From. If the Montauk Project actually becomes a part of the FromVille lore, that would explain why we saw so many children being targets of the big bad, why the monsters somehow know everything about the town folks' fears and hopes, and why we have trees in this town that can specifically send you to different locations depending on the person who steps through them. While all of this sounds like an alien experiment, it could very well be a large-scale man-made experiment. It seems like the children and their imagination is what's creating this place. That would explain the presence of the Ankui kids, and why a lot of fans feel like this place was created by Victor. What if, instead of being one of the victims of this whole thing, Victor actually created this place, then got his memory wiped out, sent back in time, and had to go through the experiment to figure out just how viable this is? Kind of like the Maze Runner, where Thomas was a part of the group that created the place, but then he was sent to experience it firsthand because he made some very powerful people mad. Or FromVille could be like an experiment like the one we saw in Resident Evil, as pointed out by user FunEagle6158. Maybe the experimenter who created this place wants to wipe out the entire civilization. Maybe they're trying to create a particular virus that can be transmitted from people to monsters, and is just strong enough to wipe out anyone that stands in its path. And the whole point of FromVille is to be this controlled experiment designed to test out the viability of the virus in question, and see just how it fares when different people with different expertise face off against it. Since Boyd, Jade, and Tabitha are all working together to solve the problem, the virus would be, for lack of a better word, defeated. To avoid that, the experimenters are specifically targeting Boyd and trying to break him. The comments under the same post bring up some interesting alternatives. One such thought went along the lines of the entire show being a manifestation of Victor's memories and dreams. Then there was the motel sign, although with no motel in sight. We've seen this trope play out in popular media very often, such as Men in Black and Interstate 60, where the main character works at a diner, suggesting diners being associated with aliens. Yet another perspective could be that the town is a simulation, or a running experiment conducted by otherworldly beings. That would explain why it might have been previously modeled after indigenous settlements, and eventually a town from the Civil War era, and then into the 70s and 80s until the present day. Speaking of the town being manifestations of Victor's memories, remember the several book titles being referenced throughout the show? Victor has read books such as Dr. Seuss, Oh, the Places You'll Go, and Enid Blyton's The Faraway Tree. Perhaps the real elements within the show are just the said manifestations from the memory of these books. Fun fact, episode 6 of the current season was originally named Scar Tissue, and then renamed to Shadowplay shortly after. Shadowplay happens to be the art of puppetry under shadows cast by a screen. I don't know about you, but my brain's giving me a Jasper alert. But hang on, there's more. Shadowplay happens to be the original Twilight Zone episode 6 from season 2, when the main premise is that reality is simply a recurring dream, with just characters changing. The intrigue only deepens when you know that Rod Serling was involved in the creation of both Star Trek and the Twilight Zone. Now, the creators of From were also amongst those writing Twilight Zone Point of Origin. There's definitely something here in my opinion. Marvelous verdict. So what do you guys think? Do you think these little clues dropped in the show by the showrunners are red herrings? Or are they painting a bigger picture, where truly Jim's theory comes to fruition? Do you think this is one big science experiment conducted by the government? Let us know in the comments, and I'll catch you guys next time. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.